Kendra Draegan had turned away 43 warriors before Rowan Hollis arrived at her door with nothing but a basket of winter apples and a question about whether she knew how to graft fruit trees. The warriors had come with boasts carved into their armor, with weapons blessed by shamans, with promises of glory and conquest and blood-soaked honor. They had flexed their muscles and recited battle poems, and challenged her to arm wrestling matches that left deep gouges in her oak table. Each one had looked at her like she was a prize to be won, a conquest to add to their long list of victories. Each one had assumed that, because she was the strongest orc woman in 3 territories, the daughter of a legendary chieftain, and capable of felling a tree with 10 swings of her axe, she would naturally want a mate who could match her in combat prowess. Each one had been wrong. Kendra had sent them away with varying degrees of patience. The first dozen had received polite rejections. The next 20 had gotten increasingly blunt refusals. The most recent arrivals had been met with a flat stare and a single word before she closed the door in their painted faces. She had stopped counting after 40, but her cousin Mira kept a running tally scratched into the wall of the longhouse they shared, adding a new mark each time another disappointed suitor trudged back down the mountain path. "You are going to die alone," Mira said cheerfully, stirring the evening stew. "Cold and bitter, and surrounded by nothing but your precious chickens. My chickens have better conversational skills than most of those fools," Kendra replied, not looking up from the boot she was mending. Her fingers worked the leather with practiced efficiency, the thick needle punching through the worn sole. "And they do not feel the need to describe every opponent they have ever defeated in tedious detail. Tornak the Ironbreaker was not so bad. He had nice teeth. He challenged me to a duel before he even told me his name." "He was nervous," Mira said. "You are intimidating," Kendra snorted. She knew what she was. 6 feet of green-skinned muscle, with shoulders that could carry a full-grown sheep and hands that had been split-knuckling wood since she was old enough to lift an axe. Her tusks were small and neat, curving up from her lower jaw in twin crescents of ivory that she kept filed smooth. Her black hair hung in a thick braid down her back, threaded with copper rings her mother had given her before the winter fever took her. She wore practical clothes, undyed wool and leather worn soft with age, and her only jewelry was the bone cuff around her wrist that marked her as clan. She was not beautiful by human standards, and she had made peace with that long ago. But among her own people, she was considered striking, strong jawline, good teeth, excellent breeding hips, according to the clan mothers who had been trying to match her with suitable males since her 20th summer. She had survived 32 winters now, and the pressure to choose a mate had grown from gentle suggestion to outright harassment. "I am not intimidating," Kendra said, setting aside the mended boot. "I simply have standards." "Standards," Mira repeated, tasting the word like it was something sour. "You want someone who does not fight in a world where everything fights. You might as well wish for a fish that does not swim." "I want someone who knows there is more to life than fighting," Kendra corrected. "I want someone who can sit quietly through a sunset, who knows how to build something instead of just breaking things, who does not think every problem can be solved with a sword." "You want a human," Mira said flatly. The words hung in the air between them, sharp as broken glass. Kendra's hand stilled on the thread she had been winding. "I want someone gentle," she said finally. "That is not a crime." "It is not a crime," Mira agreed, "but it is foolish." "Humans do not see us as people, Kendra. They see us as monsters. You could save a human child from drowning and they would still cross the road to avoid you. You could give them every kindness and they would still spit when you passed. Do not waste your heart wanting something that will never want you back." Kendra did not answer. There was no point. Mira was not wrong. The nearest human settlement was 15 miles down the mountain, and in all the years Kendra had lived in this border territory, she had never received anything from those people but fear and suspicion. Once, she had tried to trade lumber in their market. The vendor had thrown rocks until she left. Another time, she had found a lost human boy wandering in the woods and carried him back to the village. His mother had screamed and tried to stab her with a kitchen knife. She had stopped trying after that, but she had not stopped wanting. Deep in the quiet hours of the night, when Mira was asleep and the fire had burned down to embers, Kendra let herself imagine a different life. A life where she was not defined by her strength, where she could be soft without being weak, where someone looked at her and saw not a warrior or a beast or a curiosity, but simply a woman who was tired of being alone, foolish, as Mira said. But the heart was often foolish. The knock came 3 days later, just as Kendra was hauling water from the well. She heard Mira answer the door, heard the low murmur of voices, and steeled herself for another performance. Another warrior with another boast. Another rejection to carve into the wall. She set down the buckets and wiped her hands on her tunic, rehearsing the words in her head. "Thank you for your interest, but I must decline." Simple, firm, final, but when she rounded the corner of the house, she stopped short. The man at her door was not a warrior. He was tall for a human, but lean rather than muscled, with the kind of wiry build that came from years of hard work rather than combat training. His hair was brown and shaggy, tucked behind his ears, and his face was tanned and weather-worn. He wore simple clothes, a homespun shirt and canvas trousers tucked into worn boots. No armor, no weapons, just a man holding a basket of apples, looking at Mira with polite patience while she clearly tried to figure out what to do with him. "Kendra," Mira called, relief flooding her voice. "There is a human here. He says he has a question about trees." The man turned, and Kendra found herself looking into the warmest brown eyes she had ever seen. Not warm like the heat of battle lust or the fever of conquest, but warm like sunlight through autumn leaves. Like honey. Like safety. "Hello," he said, and his voice was quiet, steady. "My name is Rowan Hollis. I have an orchard about 5 miles east, just past the old stone bridge. I heard you might know something about grafting fruit trees, and I was hoping I could ask your advice. I brought apples." He lifted the basket slightly, almost shyly. "In case you wanted payment." Kendra stared at him. Her mind had gone completely blank. "Grafting," she repeated. "Yes, I have a few old apple trees that still produce good fruit, but most of my orchard is wild stock. I want to graft cuttings from the good trees onto the wild ones, but I have never done it before, and I am afraid I will kill them if I do it wrong. Someone in the village said there was an orc woman up in the hills who knew about cultivation. I thought it was worth asking, even if it was a long walk." He smiled then, a small, uncertain smile that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "I understand if you are too busy. I know it is an odd request. You walked 5 miles, Kendra said slowly, to ask me about trees." "Well, it is more like 7 if you count the climb. But yes, not to challenge me, not to court me, to ask about trees." Rowan blinked. "Were you expecting a challenge? I am very bad at fighting. I once lost an argument with a stubborn goat." Mira made a noise that might have been a laugh or a cough. Kendra shot her a look. "I know about grafting," Kendra said carefully. "My father taught me. He believed orcs should know how to grow things as well as hunt things." "That sounds like a wise philosophy," Rowan said. "Would you be willing to teach me? I can pay in apples or labor or whatever you think is fair. I am a decent carpenter if you need anything built or repaired." Kendra looked at him. Really looked. His hands were calloused but clean, his nails trimmed short. He stood without the aggressive posture most human men adopted around orcs, no puffed chest or clenched fists. He met her eyes without flinching, but there was no challenge in his gaze, just genuine interest and a kind of patient hopefulness. "Come back tomorrow morning," she heard herself say. "Bring a sharp knife and some clean cloth for binding. I will show you how it is done." Rowan's face lit up like she had offered him a chest of gold. "Thank you, truly. I will not waste your time, I promise." He set the basket of apples on the doorstep, gave a small, awkward bow, and started back down the path. Kendra watched him go, watched the way he moved with easy confidence over the uneven ground, watched until he disappeared around the bend in the trail. "Well," Mira said, picking up the apple basket, "that was strange." Kendra did not disagree. That night she lay awake long after Mira's breathing had evened into sleep. She kept thinking about warm, brown eyes, and the way Rowan had said, "Thank you," like he meant it, like her knowledge was worth something beyond her strength. She kept thinking about the fact that he had walked 7 miles just to ask a question, and had accepted her orc nature so easily it barely seemed worth mentioning. Foolish, she told herself. He is human. He probably just wants free advice, and then you will never see him again. But she found herself hoping that was wrong. Rowan arrived precisely at dawn, carrying a small pack and wearing a look of determined concentration. Kendra was already waiting by the woodshed, her own grafting knife laid out alongside strips of cloth and a small pot of wax. "Good morning," Rowan said. "I brought 3 knives because I was not sure which would be best." He unpacked them carefully, laying them on the bench. One was a folding knife with a bone handle, worn smooth with use. One was a small straight blade, wickedly sharp. The third was clearly a kitchen knife, practical and plain. Kendra picked up the folding knife, tested the edge with her thumb. "This one. The blade is thin enough for precision, and the curve will help with the cuts." "I hope that was right," Rowan said, looking pleased. "My grandfather used that knife for grafting. I have been trying to learn from his old journal, but his handwriting is terrible and half the pages are stained with what I think is jam." Despite herself, Kendra smiled. "Come. I will show you on one of my own trees first, so you can see the technique before you try it on yours." She led him to the small grove behind the house, where a dozen young apple trees stood in neat rows. They were her pride, carefully cultivated from cuttings and seeds, each one chosen for hardiness and flavor. The morning sun slanted through the branches, turning the frost-touched grass silver. "The key is a clean cut," Kendra explained, selecting a thin branch. "You want to slice at an angle like this." She demonstrated, the knife moving smoothly through the green wood. "Then you match it to a cutting from your good tree, angle to angle, and bind them together so the living wood can grow into each other." Rowan watched intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When she offered him the knife, he took it with care, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. His hands were warm despite the chill air. "Like this?" He positioned the blade, glancing at her for confirmation. "A little steeper." "Yes, that is right. Now cut smoothly, do not saw." He made the cut, and it was not perfect, but it was good enough. Kendra felt a little flutter of satisfaction, the same feeling she got when teaching Mira a new skill and watching it click into place. They worked through the morning, moving from demonstration to practice. Rowan was a careful student, asking thoughtful questions and listening to her answers with full attention. He did not try to impress her with his knowledge or interrupt with his own theories. He simply learned, his hands growing more confident with each attempt. Around midday, Mira brought out bread and cheese and a jug of cider. She gave Rowan a long, appraising look, then glanced at Kendra with raised eyebrows. Kendra ignored her. "This is excellent cider," Rowan said, taking a grateful drink. "Do you make it yourself?" "From my own apples," Kendra said. "There is a wild grove down in the valley that produces fruit too sour for eating, but it ferments well. You would have to show me where." "I have been trying to make cider for 3 years, and it always turns to vinegar." "That is a timing problem. You are probably leaving it too long before the first racking." They talked through lunch, an easy back and forth about orchards and cultivation. Rowan told her about his farm, a modest plot he had inherited from his grandfather 2 years ago. He was trying to make it profitable, but it was slow work for one person. Most of his neighbors were older farmers who remembered when the land was more fertile, before the long drought. He was the youngest in the area by a decade. "It is lonely sometimes," he admitted, breaking off a piece of bread. "But I like the work. There is something honest about farming. You put in the effort and the land gives back, or it does not, and you learn what to do differently next season." "That is a good philosophy," Kendra said. She understood that kind of honesty. Orcs respected the balance of effort and reward, the cycle of growth and harvest. "What about you?" Rowan asked. "Have you always lived up here for the last 8 years?" "Before that, I lived with my clan in the Northern Territories. But after my father died, there was a dispute about leadership. I did not agree with the direction the new chieftain wanted to take. Too much raiding, too much violence, so I left." "That must have been hard." "It was necessary," Kendra said simply. "I do not regret it. Mira came with me and we have built a good life here. We have land, shelter, food. We are beholden to no one." "Freedom is worth a lot," Rowan agreed. He looked at her with something like understanding, and Kendra felt that flutter again, stronger this time. They returned to the grafting work, and by the time the sun was lowering toward the western peaks, Rowan had successfully grafted 6 cuttings. His hands were sticky with sap and his shirt had dark stains from the wax, but he looked triumphant. "Thank you," he said, carefully packing his tools. "This is going to make such a difference for the orchard. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your time." "You are welcome," Kendra said. "Come back in a month and check on those grafts. If they have taken, you will see new growth at the joint." Rowan nodded, then hesitated. "Would it be all right if I came back before then? I mean, not for grafting, just to visit. I could bring vegetables or help with any heavy work you need done." It is nice to have someone to talk to who understands cultivation. Kendra's heart did something complicated in her chest. That would be acceptable. His smile was bright enough to hurt. "Good. That is good. I will see you soon then." She watched him walk away again, and this time when Mira came to stand beside her, Kendra did not pretend she had not been staring. "He is very polite," Mira said neutrally. "He is. For a human." "Yes, you like him," Kendra sighed. "Yes." Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she bumped her shoulder against Kendra's, a gesture of solidarity. "Be careful, please." "I will." But she already knew it was too late for careful. Rowan came back 4 days later with a basket of winter squash and a question about soil amendments. Then he came back a week after that with fresh eggs and a story about a fox that kept stealing from his henhouse. Then he came back 3 days after that with no excuse at all, just a shy smile and an offer to help split firewood. Kendra found herself watching the path every morning, wondering if today would be the day she saw that familiar figure coming up the trail. She found herself thinking about things to show him, questions to ask him, stories to tell. She found herself taking extra care with her appearance on the days he visited, making sure her braid was neat and her tusks were polished. Mira watched this development with increasing alarm. "You are going to get hurt," she said one evening after Rowan had left and Kendra was still smiling at nothing. "Humans do not love orcs, Kendra. They fear us or they hate us or they fetishize us, but they do not love us." Rowan is different. Is he? Or is he just polite? There is a difference between being friendly and being interested. Do not mistake kindness for attraction. The words stung because they echoed Kendra's own doubts. She had no evidence that Rowan saw her as anything more than a helpful neighbor and a source of agricultural knowledge. He had never touched her beyond the occasional accidental brush of hands. He had never complimented her appearance or asked personal questions about her life beyond the practical. He was friendly and warm and good company, but that did not mean he wanted her. And even if he did, what then? A human and an orc. Her clan would be horrified. His village would be worse. There was no future in wanting something so impossible, but still, she wanted. Winter deepened, and Rowan's visits became routine. He came every few days, always with some small gift or offer of help. He fixed the loose hinge on the chicken coop. He helped Kendra and Mira haul stones to repair the well wall. He brought books from his grandfather's library and read passages aloud while they worked, stories about far-off lands and ancient heroes. Kendra learned things about him in pieces, small revelations that built into a full picture. His parents had died of plague when he was 15, leaving him in his grandfather's care. His grandfather had been a gentle man who loved plants more than people, who had taught Rowan that every living thing deserved patience and respect. Rowan had watched him die slowly of age and sickness 2 years ago, helpless to stop it, and had thrown himself into the farm work to dull the grief. "I think he would have liked you," Rowan said one afternoon. They were pruning the apple trees, shaping them for spring growth. "He always said the best farmers are the ones who listen more than they talk. You have that quality." "I do not talk much," Kendra agreed. "You talk when it matters." That is better than people who fill silence with noise. He was standing close enough that she could smell the wood smoke on his clothes, the clean scent of his soap. Close enough that she could see the small scar above his eyebrow, the laugh lines around his eyes. Close enough to touch if she was brave enough. She was not brave enough. "Your grandfather sounds wise," she said instead. "He was. I miss him." Rowan's expression went distant for a moment, then refocused. "But I think he would be glad I found someone to share this knowledge with." He hated the idea of all his learning dying with him. "It will not die," Kendra promised. "I will remember." Rowan smiled at her, and the warmth in his eyes made her chest ache. The first real snow came in late autumn, heavy and silent, blanketing the mountain in white. Rowan arrived just as the storm was starting, breathless and apologetic. "I know I should have stayed home," he said, stamping snow from his boots. "But I wanted to check on you before the pass closed. Make sure you had everything you needed for the winter." "We are well stocked," Kendra assured him. "But you cannot go back down in this. You will freeze or get lost." "I will be fine. I know the path." "You will stay here tonight," Kendra said firmly. "The storm will pass by morning. It is not safe to travel." Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but another gust of wind rattled the shutters and he nodded reluctantly. "If you are sure, I do not want to impose." "It is not an imposition. It is common sense." Mira made a pointed comment about setting up the guest pallet, but her eyes were knowing. Kendra ignored her and busied herself with making dinner, a thick stew with root vegetables and dried venison. The house filled with the smell of cooking, rich and savory, and the storm howled outside like a living thing. They ate by the fire. The three of them crowded around the hearth while the wind tried to force its way through every crack in the walls. Rowan told stories about growing up in the valley, about sneaking into his grandfather's workshop and accidentally releasing a crate of chickens in the village square. Mira laughed so hard she nearly choked on her stew. Kendra just watched him, memorizing the way the firelight played across his face, the way his hands moved when he talked, the way he included both of them in his attention. never making Mira feel like an afterthought. When the meal was finished and Mira had pointedly announced she was going to bed early, Rowan and Kendra were left alone by the fire. The silence stretched between them, comfortable but charged with something unspoken. "Thank you for letting me stay," Rowan said finally. "I know it is probably strange having a human in your home." "You are not the first human I have sheltered," Kendra said, "but you are the first who thanked me for it." Why would someone not thank you? Because they were afraid or ashamed. Humans do not like to be in debt to orcs. Rowan frowned. "That seems ungrateful. It is complicated. Your people and my people have a long history of violence. It is hard to see past that, I suppose so. But I do not see why that has to be your burden to carry. You are not responsible for what other orcs have done, any more than I am responsible for what other humans have done." Kendra looked at him, surprised. It was such a simple statement, but so few people understood it. Most humans treated her like she was personally accountable for every raid and battle in the last 100 years. Most orcs thought she was a traitor for choosing to live peacefully. "You are unusual, Rowan Hollis," she said softly. "Is that a good thing?" "Yes, it is a very good thing." Something shifted in his expression, a kind of hopeful vulnerability that made Kendra's breath catch. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Kendra," a log shifted in the fire, sending up a spray of sparks, and the moment shattered. Rowan sat back, the words dying on his lips. Kendra felt the loss like a physical thing. "You should sleep," she said, her voice rougher than she intended. "You have a long walk tomorrow." "Right. Yes, sleep." He settled onto the pallet Mira had prepared, and Kendra retreated to her own bed in the loft, but she did not sleep for a long time. She lay awake, listening to the storm and the soft sound of Rowan's breathing, and wondered what he had been about to say. The snow melted slowly over the next week, turning the mountain trails into muddy streams. Rowan could not visit, and Kendra found herself restless and irritable. She threw herself into work, hauling wood and repairing the shed roof and reorganizing the storage cellar. Mira stayed out of her way, wise enough to recognize a lost cause. When Rowan finally appeared again, Kendra was out behind the house, splitting logs with methodical violence. She had been at it for hours, and her arms ached with the good burn of exertion. "You are going to split yourself if you keep swinging that hard," Rowan said, and Kendra spun around so fast she nearly dropped the axe. He was thinner than she remembered, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His smile was tired but genuine. "I did not hear you coming," Kendra said, setting down the axe before she did something embarrassing. "Sorry, I did not mean to startle you." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "I wanted to come sooner, but the pass was flooded, and then I got sick." "Nothing serious, just a bad cold, but it knocked me down for a few days. You should be resting, not hiking up a mountain." "I rested enough. I wanted to see you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Kendra's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Why?" she asked, and hated how vulnerable she sounded. Rowan took a step closer, then another. He was looking at her with an intensity she had never seen before, like he was trying to memorize every detail. "Because I think about you all the time," he said quietly. "Because I miss you when I am not here. Because every good thing that happens, I want to tell you about it. Because you are the kindest, most patient person I have ever met, and I do not care that you are an orc and I am human. I just care that when I am with you, I feel less alone." Kendra stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "Rowan, I know it is complicated," he continued, the words tumbling out now like he had been holding them back for too long. "I know there are 100 reasons why this is a bad idea, but I cannot stop feeling what I feel. And if you do not feel the same way, I will respect that. I will leave and I will not bother you again, but I had to tell you, I had to at least try. You walked 7 miles while recovering from illness, Kendra said slowly, to tell me you have feelings for me. Yes. You, a human, have feelings for me, an orc. Yes. Romantic feelings. Very much so, yes. Kendra laughed, a short, surprised sound that startled both of them. I have turned away 43 orc warriors, and the first human I meet makes me feel like this. Like what? Rowan asked, hope and fear warring on his face. Like I want to keep you. Like I want to wake up and see you every morning. Like I would fight anyone who tried to take you away from me. She crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed him. It was awkward and fierce and perfect. Rowan made a startled noise against her mouth. Then his arms came around her, and he was kissing her back with everything he had. His hands cupped her face, gentle and reverent, and Kendra felt something in her chest crack open and spill light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rowan was grinning like a fool. So, he said, "That is a yes." "That is a yes," Kendra confirmed and kissed him again. Mira found them an hour later, still wrapped around each other by the woodpile, talking in soft voices about nothing and everything. She took one look at their faces and sighed deeply. "I am happy for you," she said, and she sounded like she meant it despite the worry in her eyes. "But you both need to understand what this means. The clan will not accept this. The village will not accept this. You are going to have to choose between each other and your communities." "I already chose," Kendra said, lacing her fingers through Rowan's. "The clan cast me out when I left. I have no loyalty to them. And I do not care what the village thinks," Rowan added. "I have lived my whole life trying to fit in with people who never really accepted me anyway. Kendra sees me for who I am. That is worth more than their approval." Mira looked between them, then shook her head. "You are both fools, but you are brave fools. I hope that is enough." It was not going to be easy, Kendra knew that. There would be challenges and prejudice and perhaps danger. But as she stood there with Rowan's hand in hers and the winter sun on her face, she thought maybe Mira was right. Maybe being brave was enough. The trouble started 3 weeks later, when one of the village farmers saw Rowan climbing the mountain trail and followed him. Kendra and Rowan were in the orchard, checking the grafts, when they heard the shout. A red-faced man in his 50s was standing at the edge of the clearing, staring at them with undisguised horror. "Hollis, what in the name of the gods are you doing?" the man demanded. "Get away from that creature before it kills you." Rowan moved slightly in front of Kendra, a protective gesture that would have been charming if it was not so unnecessary. "Her name is Kendra, Harold, and she is a friend." "A friend?" Harold's voice went shrill. "That is an orc, boy. They are monsters, savages. It is probably planning to murder you in your sleep and raid the village." "She has lived up here for 8 years without raiding anyone," Rowan said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "She has done nothing but help me learn to farm better. You have no reason to insult her." "No reason." Harold sputtered. "My brother was killed by orcs in the border wars. My nephew lost his leg to an orc blade. And you are fraternizing with one like it is normal." "I am sorry for your losses," Kendra said quietly, "but I was not part of those wars. I left my clan because I did not believe in violence." "You expect me to believe that? An orc who does not like violence? That is like a fish that does not like water." "Believe what you want," Rowan said, "but leave her alone. She has done nothing to you." Harold's face went from red to purple. "You are bewitched. That is the only explanation. Everyone knows orcs use dark magic to control minds. You need to come back to the village with me right now before it is too late." "I am not going anywhere," Rowan said flatly, "and if you do not leave, I will make you." For a moment, Kendra thought Harold might actually try to fight. But then he saw the look on Rowan's face and something in his aggression deflated. "Fine," Harold spat. But do not come crying to us when that thing turns on you. You have made your choice, Hollies, and the village will remember it." He stormed off down the mountain, and Kendra let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "I am sorry," Rowan said, turning to her. "He had no right, he had every right to his anger," Kendra interrupted. "His grief is real. I cannot hold that against him. But he treated you like you were responsible for what happened to his family. To him, I am. He sees an orc and he sees the people who hurt him. It does not matter that I am different. Pain does not care about nuance." Rowan pulled her into a hug, and Kendra let herself lean into his warmth. But she was worried. Harold would tell the village what he had seen, and people would talk. Rowan's life was about to get much harder because of her. "Maybe we should stop seeing each other," she said quietly. "At least in public. I do not want to make your life difficult." "No," Rowan said firmly. "I am not hiding you like you are something shameful. I am not going to pretend I do not care about you just because it makes other people uncomfortable." "Rowan, no," he repeated. "We do this together in the open, or we do not do it at all. I refuse to love you in secret like it is wrong." Love, he had said love. Kendra felt her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. "You are stubborn," she said. "I learned from the best," he replied and kissed her forehead. The backlash came faster than Kendra expected. Within days, Rowan found his market stall vandalized, his crops stolen from the field. Someone left a dead rat on his doorstep with a note that called him a traitor. When he tried to buy supplies in the village, merchants refused to serve him. He told Kendra about it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather, but she could see the hurt beneath his calm exterior. "You could tell them it was a misunderstanding," she offered. "Say that Harold was wrong, that we are just neighbors." "I could," Rowan agreed. "But I will not lie about you, about us. It would make your life easier. It would make me a coward." He said it simply, without drama, and Kendra felt her heart overflow with love for this stubborn, brave, foolish man. The situation came to a head a month later when a delegation from the village arrived at Rowan's farm. 6 men, all armed, led by the village elder. Rowan saw them coming and sent word to Kendra, who arrived just as the confrontation was starting. "Rowan Hollis," the elder said, his voice grave. "We have tolerated your eccentricities and your isolation, but consorting with orcs crosses a line. You are endangering the entire village by bringing that creature into our territory." "Kendra has never set foot in your village," Rowan said. "She lives on her own land, bothering no one. Her presence is a threat. Orcs are drawn to each other. Where there is one, more will follow. We cannot risk a warband descending on us because you decided to befriend a monster." "She is not a monster. She is an orc. That is the same thing." Kendra stepped forward and all 6 men tensed, hands going to their weapons. She raised her hands carefully, showing she was unarmed. "I understand your fear," she said, "but I swear to you I have no intention of bringing harm to your village. I left my clan years ago. I have no contact with other orcs. I just want to live quietly and be left alone." "Your intentions do not matter," the elder said. "You are a danger by your nature. We are giving Rowan a choice. Sever all contact with you or leave the village territory permanently." "You cannot force me off my own land," Rowan said, his voice shaking with anger. "My family has farmed this plot for 3 generations. Your family is dead, boy, and if you choose an orc over your own people, you are no longer part of this community. You will receive no help from us, no trade, no protection. You will be an exile." "Then I am an exile," Rowan said without hesitation. The elder's expression went hard. "So be it. But understand this. If we see that orc anywhere near the village, we will kill her. This is not a negotiation. This is a warning." He gestured to the other men and they left as a group, their message delivered. Rowan stood rigid until they were out of sight, then let out a shaky breath. "I am sorry," Kendra said. "I am so sorry. Do not apologize. This is not your fault. It is entirely my fault. You lost your community because of me." "I lost people who were never really my community," Rowan corrected. "If their acceptance was conditional on me hating you, then it was worthless anyway. What will you do now?" Rowan looked at her, and despite everything, he smiled. "I was thinking I might move up the mountain. Your place has better water access anyway." Kendra felt her chest tighten. "You cannot be serious." "Why not? I can farm anywhere, and this way I will not have to walk 7 miles every time I want to see you." "Rowan, you are talking about leaving your home, your grandfather's home." "My grandfather told me once that home is not a place, it is the people you choose to be with. I choose you, Kendra, if you will have me." She kissed him then, there in the open with the sun on their faces, and did not care who saw. Rowan moved 3 weeks later, bringing what he could carry and abandoning the rest. The farm was too far to maintain from the mountain, and he could not risk going back to the village for supplies. It hurt him to let it go. Kendra could see that, but he never complained. He simply rolled up his sleeves and set about building a new life. Mira helped them construct a second cabin, smaller than the main house but comfortable. Rowan planted a new garden, started a new compost heap, and transferred cuttings from his apple trees to integrate with Kendra's orchard. He worked from dawn to dusk, and at night he fell into bed beside Kendra, exhausted but content. They settled into a rhythm, the 3 of them. Mira still watched Rowan with cautious eyes, but she warmed to him gradually, appreciating his willingness to work and his unfailing politeness. He fixed things around the homestead that had been broken for months, improved their water collection system, and taught them both how to make his grandfather's famous apple butter. Winter came again, and this time Rowan was there to share it. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply being together. Kendra taught him the Orc language, stumbling over conjugations while Mira laughed at his pronunciation. Rowan taught her card games his grandfather had loved, complicated strategic games that required patience and planning. It was a good life, a quiet life, the kind of life Kendra had always wanted but never thought she could have. The trouble, when it came not from humans but from orcs. A raiding party passed through the territory in early spring, 6 warriors looking for easy prey. They saw the smoke from Kendra's chimney and decided to investigate, expecting to find a human homestead ripe for plunder. What they found instead was an orc woman standing in front of a cabin, arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "This land is claimed," Kendra said in the orcish tongue. "Move on." The leader, a scarred veteran with a broken tusk, looked her up and down with disdain. "Claimed by who?" "A lone female. Where is your war band?" "I have no war band. I live peacefully here. There is nothing for you to take." "There is always something to take," the leader said. He gestured to his companions. "Search the buildings, take anything valuable." "No," Kendra said flatly. The leader laughed. "You think you can stop us? You are outnumbered and outmatched, little sister. Stand aside before you get hurt." I said no. She had her axe in her hands before they could react, the same axe she used for splitting wood, heavy and wickedly sharp. The raiders hesitated, reassessing. Kendra might be alone, but she was also tall and broad-shouldered and holding her weapon like she knew how to use it. "Last chance," the leader said. "Stand down or we will make this ugly." "It is already ugly," Rowan said, stepping out of the cabin with a hunting bow. 6 warriors threatening 1 woman. Pretty cowardly, if you ask me. The raiders stared at him, clearly trying to process the sight of a human defending an orc. "What is this?" the leader demanded in the common tongue. "You keep a human pet." "He is not a pet," Kendra said coldly. He is my partner, and if you touch him, I will gut you." "Partner," the leader repeated, and his expression twisted with disgust. "You are a disgrace. Consorting with humans, living like a tame animal. Our ancestors would spit on you. Our ancestors would have respected my choice to live as I please. Now leave before I make you." The leader drew his sword, and the other raiders followed suit. Kendra shifted her stance, ready to fight, and felt Rowan move to cover her flank. They were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of position and motivation. These raiders were looking for easy pickings, not a real battle. The standoff lasted for several heartbeats. Then Mira appeared from the tree line behind the raiders, her own bow drawn and an arrow nocked. "3 against 6, she called. "Still bad odds for you. We know this terrain and you do not. We can pick you off before you ever reach the cabin, or you could leave and find easier targets." The leader looked between them, calculating. He was a warrior, but he was not stupid. This was not worth losing men over. "Fine," he spat. "Keep your pathetic life. But if I see you again, Orc, I will not be so merciful." He sheathed his sword and gestured for his warband to follow. They disappeared into the trees, and Kendra did not lower her axe until they were long out of sight. "That was unpleasant," Rowan said, lowering his bow. His hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," Kendra said. She looked at Mira. "Thank you for the backup." "You are my cousin. Where else would I be?" Mira said, but there was warmth in her voice. "Though I think we should be more careful. If one warband found us, others might too." "Agreed. We should set up better defenses, maybe some warning bells on the perimeter." "I can build those," Rowan offered, "and we should start keeping watch at night, rotating shifts." They spent the rest of the day preparing, turning their peaceful homestead into something more defensible. It was a reminder that safety was never guaranteed, that the world outside their small sanctuary was still dangerous. But that night, curled up next to Rowan in their bed, Kendra felt grateful rather than afraid. He had stood with her without hesitation, had put himself in danger to protect her home. That kind of loyalty was worth more than all the safety in the world. "I love you," she said into the darkness. "I love you too," Rowan replied, his voice soft and certain. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Kendra dreamed of apple trees in full bloom. Spring turned to summer, and the homestead flourished. The grafted apple trees showed strong new growth. The garden produced more than they could eat, so they dried and preserved the excess. Rowan built a small smokehouse for meat and a root cellar for storage. Mira expanded the chicken coop and started raising geese, which were excellent at making noise when strangers approached. It was hard work, but it was good work, the kind that left you tired but satisfied at the end of the day. And through it all, Kendra and Rowan grew closer, their relationship deepening from new love into something more solid and enduring. They learned each other's rhythms. Kendra learned that Rowan was cheerful in the mornings, but needed quiet in the evenings. Rowan learned that Kendra processed emotions through physical activity, that if she was chopping extra wood it meant she was working through something difficult. They learned how to disagree without fighting, how to give each other space when needed, how to support without smothering. Mira watched them with a mix of fondness and exasperation, and occasionally made pointed comments about when they were going to make things official. Orcs did not have elaborate wedding ceremonies, but there were rituals for declaring a partnership. Promises made before witnesses, gifts exchanged, a shared meal to symbolize the joining of lives. "We do not need a ceremony," Kendra said one evening, after Mira had been particularly persistent. "We are already committed." "Ceremonies are not about need," Mira countered. "They are about declaring your intentions to the world, about making it real. It is already real." "Then what is the harm in making it official?" Kendra did not have a good answer to that. The truth was, she wanted to marry Rowan. She wanted to stand in front of Mira and declare that he was hers and she was his. But she was afraid that making it official would somehow make it more fragile. Afraid that the world would find new ways to take him from her if she claimed him too loudly. Foolish fears, perhaps. But fear was not always rational. Rowan solved the problem by proposing on a random Tuesday afternoon while they were weeding the garden. "Marry me," he said, pulling a carved wooden ring from his pocket. Kendra stared at him, a half-pulled weed dangling from her hand. "What? Marry me? Or whatever the orc equivalent is. Bond with me. Partner with me officially. I do not care what we call it. I just want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." "You made a ring." "I made a ring," he confirmed. "It is pine, because that is what I had available, and I know it is not fancy, but I thought." Kendra kissed him, hard and desperate, and the weed fell forgotten to the ground. "Yes," she said when they broke apart. "Yes, of course, yes." Rowan's smile could have lit the sun. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, smooth and warm against her green skin. They were married 3 days later, in a simple ceremony on the hillside overlooking the valley. Mira officiated, speaking the old words about partnership and loyalty and the joining of paths. Kendra wore a wreath of wildflowers in her hair. Rowan wore his best shirt and could not stop grinning. They exchanged gifts, as tradition required. Kendra gave Rowan a knife she had forged herself, the blade decorated with an apple tree etching. Rowan gave Kendra a bound journal, the pages blank and waiting, "for recording your cultivation knowledge," he explained. "So it does not die with us, so we can pass it on." It was the most thoughtful gift anyone had ever given her. They shared a meal, bread and cheese and apples and honey, eating from the same plate with their fingers intertwined. And when the sun set and Mira tactfully retreated to her own cabin, Rowan carried Kendra over the threshold like she weighed nothing, and they spent their wedding night learning new ways to make each other happy. The next morning, Kendra woke to find Rowan already up, sitting by the window with the journal open on his lap. He was writing something, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you doing?" she asked, stretching. "Starting our book," he said. "Recording everything you have taught me. I thought we could write it together, make it a proper guide for anyone who wants to learn." Kendra joined him at the window, reading over his shoulder. His handwriting was neat and precise, nothing like his grandfather's jam-stained scrawl. He had written the title at the top of the first page in careful letters, "A Practical Guide to Cultivation" by Kendra Draegan and Rowan Hollis. "You put my name first," she observed. "You are the expert, I am just the assistant." "Partner," she corrected. "We are partners." "Partners," he agreed, and kissed her temple. They spent the morning writing together, documenting grafting techniques and soil amendments and pest control methods. It was peaceful work, satisfying in a different way than physical labor. They were creating something that would outlast them, knowledge that would help people long after they were gone. This was what Kendra had always wanted, she realized. Not just love, though that was precious, but purpose, legacy. A life that meant something beyond survival. The seasons turned and life continued. They had good harvests and bad harvests, easy winters and hard winters. The village occasionally sent hunters through the territory, looking for trouble, but they never found any. The orc warbands learned to avoid the area after word spread about the crazy orc woman who lived with humans, and had successfully defended her home against 6 warriors. Kendra and Rowan became something of a legend in their own way. Proof that different peoples could coexist. An example, for better or worse, of what happened when you chose love over tribal loyalty. Not everyone approved. They still received threats occasionally, messages left at the boundary of their land warning them to separate or face consequences. But they also started to receive visitors. Other outcasts, other people who did not fit neatly into their assigned roles. A human woman who had been cast out for practicing herb lore that the village priest deemed too close to witchcraft. An orc man who refused to fight and was branded a coward by his clan. A half-orc child, product of violence, who belonged nowhere and was welcome nowhere. One by one they came to the mountain, and one by one Kendra and Rowan welcomed them. The homestead grew, expanding into a small settlement. They built more cabins, cleared more land, established a community based not on shared race or religion, but on shared values of peace and hard work and mutual respect. It was not utopia. There were conflicts and disagreements and personality clashes. But they worked through them together, establishing rules and traditions that prioritized fairness over tradition. Mira took charge of organizing the settlement, her practical nature perfectly suited to managing the logistics of communal living. Rowan taught farming techniques to anyone who wanted to learn. Kendra became the unofficial leader, the one people came to when they needed wisdom or mediation, or just a reminder that they belonged. 5 years after that first knock on her door, Kendra stood on the hillside and looked down at what they had built. 20 people now called this mountain home. Smoke rose from a dozen chimneys. Children played in the common area, human and orc and half-blood all mixed together, learning from the start that differences were not barriers. It was not the life she had imagined when she left her clan. It was better. Rowan came to stand beside her, slipping his hand into hers. He had silver in his hair now, and more lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same as the day he had arrived with a basket of apples and a question about trees. "Happy?" he asked. "Deliriously," Kendra replied. "Good, because I have a surprise for you." He led her back to their cabin, where a small sapling stood in a pot by the door. It was an apple tree, carefully grafted, the joint wrapped in clean cloth. "I made a new variety," Rowan explained. "Grafted cuttings from 3 different trees, trying to combine the best traits of each. It is going to take years to see if it worked, but I thought we could plan it together. Start a new orchard for the settlement." Kendra looked at the fragile tree, at the hope and patience it represented, and felt her eyes burn with tears. "It is perfect," she said. They planted it that afternoon, choosing a spot on the south slope where it would get full sun. The whole settlement gathered to watch, making a ceremony of it. Children brought water from the stream. The herb woman blessed it with words passed down from her grandmother. The orc man who had refused to fight sang a planting song from his homeland, his voice rough but earnest. When the tree was settled and watered and staked securely, Rowan stood and addressed the gathered people. "This tree is going to take a long time to mature," he said. "Years before it produces fruit, maybe decades before it reaches full growth. But that is all right because we are not going anywhere. We are building something lasting here, something that will outlive us and provide for the people who come after us." "A legacy," Kendra added. "Not of conquest or glory, but of cultivation, of choosing to grow things instead of destroying them." There was a murmur of agreement and someone started clapping. The applause spread, awkward but heartfelt, and Kendra felt Rowan's hand squeeze hers. That night, lying in bed with the window open to the spring air, Kendra thought about the strange path her life had taken. From a warrior's daughter to a peaceable farmer, from a clan outcast to a community leader. From someone who had turned away 43 suitors to someone who had found a partner beyond her wildest imaginings. "You ever regret it?" she asked Rowan quietly. "Giving up your old life for this one?" "Never," he said without hesitation. "Do you?" "Not for a single moment." "Good." Because I have big plans for that orchard. We are going to need a lot of help when harvest season comes." Kendra laughed, the sound soft and content in the darkness. "We have plenty of help. Too much help sometimes. I swear that half-orc child is always underfoot. She looks up to you." "They all do. That is terrifying. You are doing fine, better than fine. You are exactly what this place needs." Kendra turned to face him, studying his features in the moonlight. "We are what this place needs, not me. Us." "Us," Rowan agreed and kissed her softly. The years continued to pass, measured in harvests and seasons and the steady growth of the settlement. The apple tree Rowan had created finally bore fruit in its 7th year, small green apples with a perfect balance of sweet and tart. They saved the seeds and planted a whole grove, and those trees became the foundation of the settlement's economy. They traded apples and cider down in the valley, establishing tentative relationships with merchants brave enough to deal with a mixed community. Some of the children grew up and left, seeking their fortunes elsewhere. Some stayed, putting down roots and starting families of their own. The settlement's reputation spread, attracting more outcasts and refugees. It was never large, but it was stable and self-sufficient and remarkably peaceful. Kendra and Rowan grew older together, their bodies wearing down from years of hard work but their love remaining strong. On their 10th anniversary, Rowan gave Kendra a new ring, this one carved from apple wood and inlaid with silver. On their 20th, Kendra gave Rowan a bound set of journals, all the cultivation knowledge they had gathered over the years, copied in neat handwriting and illustrated with careful drawings. They trained apprentices, taught classes, and mediated disputes. They welcomed grandchildren from settlers they had helped years before. They planted trees and built fences and repaired roofs, and did all the unglamorous work of maintaining a community. And through it all, they made time for each other, for quiet mornings watching the sunrise, for long evenings reading by the fire, for walks through the orchard, checking on trees they had planted together decades ago. On a crisp autumn day in their 30th year together, Rowan collapsed while harvesting apples. Kendra found him lying peacefully beneath his favorite tree, a smile on his face and an apple in his hand. The healers said his heart had simply stopped, worn out from a long life well lived. The grief was crushing. Absolute. Kendra held his body and howled, a sound of pure anguish that echoed across the mountain and brought the entire settlement running. They gathered around her, human and orc together, and bore witness to her pain. They buried him beneath the tree where he had died, the tree he had created, and Kendra planted wildflowers on the grave. She spoke the words of the orc funeral rite, about the cycle of life and death and return to the earth. Others spoke too, sharing memories and gratitude and love. It took a long time for the grief to soften into something bearable. Kendra threw herself into work, maintaining the routines they had built together. She still woke at dawn and checked the orchard and worked in the garden. But now she did it alone, and the solitude was both painful and necessary. Mira stayed close, her presence a quiet comfort. The settlement rallied around her, bringing food and help and understanding. They had all loved Rowan, and they honored his memory by continuing the work he had started. A year after his death, the tree above his grave produced the most abundant harvest it had ever given. Fat red apples, dozens of them, weighing down the branches. Kendra picked them carefully, feeling like Rowan was somehow still providing, still caring for her even from beyond death. She made cider from those apples, the best batch she had ever produced, and shared it at the harvest festival. They toasted Rowan's memory, telling stories about his terrible jokes and his patient teaching and his absolutely lethal aim with a snowball. And slowly, carefully, Kendra learned how to be whole again. not the same as she had been before, but whole in a new way. She carried Rowan with her in everything she did, in every tree she tended and every lesson she taught. He was woven into the fabric of her life so thoroughly that he could never truly be gone. She lived another 15 years, watching the settlement grow and prosper. She saw the completion of the new meeting house, built from timber they had planted in the early years. She saw the birth of the first child born to two people who had both grown up in the settlement, a new generation that had never known life divided by race. She saw the apple orchards expand to cover the entire south slope, hundreds of trees bearing fruit that was sought after throughout the region. And when her own time came, she went peacefully, sitting beneath Rowan's tree with the bound journals in her lap. They found her in the morning, a peaceful expression on her face, one hand resting on the ground as if reaching for someone just beyond sight. They buried her next to Rowan, beneath the tree that had been his gift and his legacy. The settlement mourned, but they also celebrated. Two lives well lived, two people who had chosen love over fear, who had built something lasting against all odds. The settlement continued without them, as they had always intended. The children and grandchildren they had helped raise carried on the work, tending the orchards and teaching the lessons and maintaining the peace. And every spring, when the apple trees bloomed, the settlement gathered at the grove to remember. To tell the story of the orc woman who turned away 43 warriors and the quiet farmer who knocked. To honor the legacy of cultivation and kindness and stubborn, defiant love. The story became legend over time, passed down through generations. Details were embellished, motivations simplified, conflicts dramatized, but the core remained true. Two people from different worlds who found each other against impossible odds and built a life worth living. And in the heart of the settlement, the tree that Rowan created continued to grow. Its roots went deep, its branches spread wide, and every year it produced the sweetest apples anyone had ever tasted. The settlers called them Holly's apples, and they said if you planted the seeds with love and patience, the trees would grow strong and true, just like the people who had made them. The legacy lived on in other ways too. The journals Kendra and Rowan had written became foundational texts for cultivation throughout the region. Their techniques spread far and wide, helping farmers of all races improve their yields and steward their land more effectively. The settlement itself became a model, proof that diverse communities could not only survive but thrive. Other mixed settlements sprang up, inspired by the example on the mountain. Some succeeded, some failed, but each one carried forward the idea that race did not have to determine destiny. That orcs and humans and everyone in between could work together, live together, love together if they chose courage over fear. It was not a revolution. It was quieter than that, more gradual. Just seeds planted and tended and given time to grow. Just people choosing every day to see each other as individuals rather than as representatives of their race. Just the slow, patient work of cultivation, applied not to trees but to society itself. And it all started with a woman who wanted gentleness instead of glory, and a man who knocked on her door with apples and a question. In the decades that followed, scholars would study the settlement, trying to understand what made it work when so many other attempts at integration had failed. They interviewed the residents, analyzed the social structures, wrote papers about the economic models and governance systems. But the residents always gave the same answer when asked about the secret to their success. They would point to the tree on the hillside, to the graves beneath it, and say simply, "They taught us to see people, not races. They taught us that cultivation takes patience. They taught us that love is stronger than hate if you are brave enough to choose it." And then they would offer the scholars a glass of fresh cider and a bag of Holly's apples to take home, and send them on their way with full bellies and full hearts. The settlement itself evolved over the generations, adapting to new challenges and opportunities. But it never lost sight of the principles that had founded it: peace over violence, growth over destruction, acceptance over prejudice, community over tribalism. They were not perfect. They had their conflicts and failures and disappointments. But they kept trying, kept learning, kept choosing to be better than their worst impulses. And that, in the end, was the real legacy. Not perfection, but persistence. Not utopia, but the daily choice to build something good. The tree that marked Rowan and Kendra's graves grew to be the oldest and largest in the orchard, its massive trunk twisted with age but still producing abundant fruit every year. Children climbed in its branches. Couples carved their initials in its bark. The settlement held meetings beneath its shade, making decisions that would affect generations yet unborn. And sometimes, in the quiet hours between dusk and dark, people swore they could hear voices in the rustling leaves. A man's laugh, warm and content. A woman's voice, strong and gentle. Not ghosts, but memories so powerful they had soaked into the wood itself, becoming part of the living tree. The settlement honored them in practical ways, too. Every new child born there was given a sapling to plant and tend, their own tree to grow alongside them. Every couple who bonded planted an apple tree together, grafting their individual strengths into something new and unique. Every person who came seeking refuge was put to work in the orchards, learning the rhythms of cultivation and the patience it required. Because that was what Kendra and Rowan had understood, what they had lived and taught. That relationships, like trees, needed constant care. That diversity made you stronger, not weaker, just as grafting improved fruit. That the best things in life took time to grow, and rushing them only led to failure. Simple truths, really. But truths that the world kept forgetting and having to relearn. 100 years after that first knock on Kendra's door, the settlement held a centennial celebration. The current residents, a mix of humans and orcs and half-bloods and even a few other species who had found their way to the mountain, gathered in the orchard for a festival. They ate apple pies and drank cider. They told stories about the founders, some accurate and some wildly embellished. They planted a new grove of trees, using seeds from the original Holly's apple tree, ensuring that the legacy would continue for another century. And at sunset, they gathered around the ancient tree and sang. Old songs and new songs, orcish war chants and human lullabies and original compositions written by residents who had grown up speaking both languages fluently. The music rose into the evening air, carried on the wind down the mountain and out into the wider world. It was a sound of hope, of defiance, of love that had outlasted death and grown into something larger than any individual life. It was the sound of two people who had been brave enough to reach across a divide and build a bridge, who had chosen each other when the world said they should not, who had planted seeds that bloomed into forests, and somewhere, in whatever place the dead go to rest, Kendra and Rowan heard that singing and smiled. Their work was done. Their legacy was secure. The harvest they had planted a century ago was still bearing fruit, still nourishing the people they had loved and the people those people loved in turn. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything they had ever wanted, that quiet afternoon when a farmer knocked on an orc woman's door and asked about grafting apple trees. Everything they had dreamed of in those secret hours of the night when they dared to hope for a different kind of future. They had built it. Together. One day at a time, one tree at a time, one small choice at a time. And their love, that stubborn, defiant love that had seemed so impossible at the start, had changed the world, not all at once, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily, the way all real change happens. Through patience and persistence, and the daily choice to see the best in people instead of the worst. The singing continued long into the night, and the ancient apple tree stood witness to it all, its branches heavy with fruit, its roots going deep into the earth where two people slept side by side, together even in death as they had been in life. And the wind carried the music down the mountain, into the valley, across the territories, spreading the message that had started with a simple question about grafting trees and grown into a testament of what was possible when people chose love over fear. The settlement slept that night secure in the knowledge that they were part of something larger than themselves, that the choices made 100 years ago by two brave souls continued to shape their present and would shape the future of generations yet unborn. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the mountain and touched the apple orchards with golden light, life would continue. Trees would need tending. Children would need teaching. Work would need doing. The daily cycle of cultivation and growth and patient nurturing that Kendra and Rowan had started would go on, carried forward by people who understood that the best things in life are worth working for, worth fighting for, worth choosing every single day. That was their final gift. Not just the settlement or the orchards or the knowledge they had shared, but the example they had set. Two people from different worlds who looked at each other and saw not a monster or a curiosity or an impossibility, but simply someone worth knowing, worth loving, worth building a life with. It was a gift that kept giving, a harvest that never ended, a tree whose fruit nourished body and soul alike. And it all started with a knock on a door, a basket of apples, and a question about grafting trees. The end.